you just joined us as well. Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, why don't we get started here? First of all, want to welcome everyone, not only committee members, but we have quite a few folks from the community that are logged in as well. It looks like maybe close to 15 people, so that's good to see all the interest. Again, this meeting is being streamed and through Zoom, and as well as YouTube. It's being recorded so that it'll be placed on the website, coconino.az.gov, Munds Park Equipment Barn. So folks that might miss this meeting, they can come in and catch up the meeting at a later time that's convenient. Also encourage any of the members to continue using the Munds Park barn@gmail.com to communicate, as well as during our session today, we'll try picking up any of the questions or comments folks have during our discussion. Again, want to reemphasize the purpose of our meeting is to, the purpose and the objective of the committee is working together with Coconino County Public Works, the staff, to lead in a community-driven process to find a location for a potential public works equipment barn for Munds Park. Hope everyone has the matrix in front of them, as well as the map that we sent out. We will be using these documents in our meeting today. I want to first thank not only the committee members, but the community residents that have submitted possible equipment barn sites for consideration. These suggested sites were provided to the county for a preliminary review and feasibility assessment for input to the committee for our review. And if everyone has that matrix in front of them, are there any other sites that we might have missed?
This is Everett. I didn't see Crystal Point. Not Crystal Point, Willard Springs. I always thought Willard Springs was a good alternative to Schnebly Hill. Am I missing that?
Well, it's on the matrix, in the bottom of the matrix. We said the Schnebly Hill location. I believe it's.
Oh, okay. That was.
Road. But just because of this map, not
I understand.
Blown up enough, but our intent is to review that location as well today.
Good. Okay.
Okay. If no other comments, then as our agenda shows, we'll have Jeff Stein give us an overview narrative for each of the sites. And this will be followed by our committee reviewing and defining each of the categories that will be used to evaluate each potential site. As we do this, we need to determine just how we measure each category so that we can support our potential site recommendation with both quantitative as well as qualitative information. So that's the intent of putting this matrix together for us. Any questions on that before we proceed? Okay, then as we have on the agenda, what we'll do is request Jeff if he can review the list of sites that we placed out there on the barn. I will address location G at a little bit later time, but at this time, let me ask Jeff if he can review those various sites. And Jeff?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. So I'll just, we'll go in alphabetical order there and start with sites A, B, and C. I put them together. So they came up as a suggested location. They're located near the ADOT rest area off I-17 to the northwest of Munds Park off I-17. These sites are on the Forest Service properties and would require their process and approval. We need to do some further evaluation on access, but there's some challenges potentially with respect to either A, using I-17 for access, or going through the forest, which is some distance and would cross private parcels. So just preliminary evaluation, there's some access issues potentially. Also, it would need to cross through a low water crossing, and there's potentially some drainage issues. And it is far away from utilities. So that kind of preliminary based on the matrix. But those sites, again, there are 3 of them that were proposed, and they're essentially adjacent to the rest area west of Munds Park off of I-17. Site D is a private parcel.
Is Forest Service, is that Forest Service road that accesses A, B, and C that now does go through private property? But is that Forest Service road accessible? In other words, can you drive through it even though it goes through private property?
Everett, we need to evaluate that as far as what that road easement looks like. Is it Forest Service access only? Is it, so we don't know what the easement or the access of that road looks like. We would have to evaluate if that's an option, or if it's private, and we'd have to work with a private party potentially if that was the desired site. So that would require some further evaluation to determine if access off the highway was viable.
Thank you.
Sure. So site D is located off Fairway Drive in Munds Park. The county has received a proposal from the owner for possible development of that site. We received that and then kind of began this process. So at this time, we're working through our selection matrix that we're developing to kind of use that to evaluate once this process works its way through. So, but we did receive a proposal, but subsequent to that, we began this process. We're working with the community. We were developing the matrix. So we revisit that in light of the product of this process. Obviously, that site is located in the community. So just geographically, it's central, and there's utilities in the immediate vicinity. So those are some of the features of that site. Site E is a private parcel located southeast of Munds Park on the west side of I-17. The county has also received a proposal from that owner for possible development of the site. And again, that was received just as this process began. So we'd be taking the products of this and applying that as part of the evaluation of that potential site. There is, with that location, some access issues. There is a drainage there. There's a low water crossing, which I believe is a 25-year storm. So we need to look at accessibility in the winter and how that would work. It's a little bit removed from the community, so there could be some utility challenges and costs associated with getting services to that site. Site F is immediately adjacent to that, to the south.
I have a quick question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
On the private parcels, are they is the home or the owners of those parcels, are they saying they're for sale or lease or either one?
Primarily, the option one in both of those cases would be a lease. We haven't heard definitively that it wouldn't be for sale. I think really there's a lot of negotiation that would be undertaken if we selected one of those.
Okay.
But we've discussed purchasing, but the leaning is to a lease model for
Okay.
both of those sites.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure, Kat. So site F is, again, just south of site E, and that is located on Forest Service property. So that would require their process and approval. And then similar to the opportunities challenges with site E, there is access issues with the low water crossing and the proximity to utilities. And then Site G, we were going to discuss in a moment. That was our initial site we approached the Forest Service on when we began this. They indicated that that wasn't really a desirable site, and that led us to evaluate the other sites, Hillside, for example. So, but it was also suggested again during this process. So we've included it, and Tom will speak to that more in a moment. We also had the current site at Schnebly Hill mentioned, and that's located pretty far outside the community. The biggest challenge with that is it really doesn't solve what we're trying to solve. So it requires highway travel and the safety and response time concerns with that distance. So it's limited in that it really doesn't meet one of the core project goals. Everett mentioned Willard Springs. That's where our transfer station is. I just added that. I didn't have that in my matrix, but again, similar to Schnebly Hill, that site is remote from the community, so it would kind of not meet one of the key goals of the project, which is to not have highway travel due to safety and response time concerns. So those are the totality of sites we have right now, which is shown on the map here, plus our current site at Schnebly Hill and our proposed site at Willard Springs. We do have a transfer station there, so we do have an operation at that location, but it's, again, remote to the community. So, Tom, that kind of covers everything. I can take questions on any of that.
Yes. At this time with Jeff, do we have any questions that you'd like for him to address before we get into any of the specific details?
This is Everett. We never got on Schnebly Hill. Was there any reason you had to leave Schnebly Hill other than the remoteness to the community?
I can speak to that a little bit. I don't know if Carl's here. I think we'd have to work with ADOT to, if we were to construct a barn, to get agreement on that. I don't believe that we've discussed with ADOT building a barn, if that would be agreeable to them. So there would be a process to work with ADOT to get approval. So I think the primary issue with that site is the distance and not meeting the goal of eliminating the highway travel to get to the community.
Yeah, that's the way it is right now. We have kind of just a handshake agreement with ADOT there right now. We don't have any ownership or anything, so all that would have to be worked out. But the only issue is the highway. Otherwise, that's not an issue, but whether or not we can even obtain it, it probably wouldn't be from necessarily just ADOT. It would also be the Forest Service. I have a feeling that whole thing is on a Forest Service permit, even the ADOT part. So all that would have to be worked out, but it's a potential site for sure. It's just the highway would be our only concern.
So I have a quick question here. It was brought up, safety and response times are two of the reasons we're doing this. Is there, looking at the map here, what are the response time changes if we move from Schnebly to A, B, C, or anywhere else on the map? I mean, what are we gaining, I guess, is my point, versus what we currently have?
It was potentially as much as 30 minutes, throughout the full shift both ways. The problem with the highway is you never know. Some of the shutdowns, some of the limitations to get us, to our equipment back to the barn and stuff. But I think it was estimated roughly, it might even be a little less, might be 20 minutes per shift that we would save if we could be in the subdivision. Safety is the other issue. Like I said, we've had incidents on slow moving vehicles on high speed highways. It is an issue.
And And I think if I can add one item, so at Schnebly Hills, we don't have that formal agreement. Like we're guests in that facility. We can definitely like work with ADOT and the Forest Service to see like if there is any viability in that regard. I think the response time from all these locations that have come up so far, we haven't done any analysis on them yet, because this was just getting the community's input of where the potential sites are. I think the next step it would be looking at the matrix of how we evaluate all these different parcels and different sites to understand like what are some of the limitations, the positives and the negatives for all of them.
I noticed on the questions here, I did have from one of the participants today asking, have there been any accidents to or from Schnebly Hill site? Is this off the table?
We have not had an accident with our equipment on I-17. The incident that we've had was on I-40, I believe, a few years back. And again, it's not like what we're trying to do is like mitigate that risk and make sure that we are not putting the public as well as our team members and the equipment at any danger. So, but there hasn't been any in Schnebly Hill on I-17. But there is that concern. That's why we have always looked at options within the park or adjacent to Munds Park.
Josh Tope just commented as well, saying that the ADOT yard is on Forest Service property.
Yeah, on part of Everett's question there, what he was asking that still has not been answered is, has the county been asked to leave the ADOT yard?
No, we have not been asked to leave the ADOT yard. That is not something that anyone has asked us to do.
And does the yard that they're currently at have the ability to build a structure there to protect the equipment, which is part of the project to move it to Munds?
Yeah, I think the potential would be there, but we have not like approached that or had that conversation. And it does involve like both ADOT as well as the Forest Service in order to like make those investments. What we are faced with is that we have a long-term need for our equipment and our operations, and we are trying to be flexible enough, but also thoughtful in the process of like solving that long-term need and having a solution that is viable and that meets as many of those project goals that we've been talking over in the last 4 to 5 months now, and hitting as many of them as possible.
Going back to, I kind of like the idea of Willard Springs. I think Willard Springs is much better for drivers because drivers are coming from Flagstaff instead of going to Schnebly Hill. Also, it's my understanding, and Tom and I worked on that project of keeping the green waste open. That is, right now, that's under contract with the Forest Service. All the infrastructure is there. It's not being used for waste transfer anymore. Why would that not be a perfect site where the county has total control over that site? They already have a lease with the Forest Service, and they could just put the barn there, and it would seem to solve all the problems. Obviously, you're on I-17. Now, there is the Forest Service road that does go from Willard Springs, so that is an option. But Willard Springs just seems, if you're going to leave Schnebly Hill, you said you had a handshake. So you got nothing formal with Schnebly Hill, but but, but with Willard Springs, everything is formalized. What am I missing?
I don't think we're missing anything. I think if that was, again, like the goal for identifying these parcels and sites were to identify the options, and then the next step would be to evaluate all those options in some form and way that is consistent across the parcel. So if we want to add the Willard Springs site to this, like we can definitely do that.
Why wouldn't you?
Let me do this so we can keep it moving along. We can add that as one of the potential sites, if you like, Everett, so that when we go through and developing how we're going to evaluate these sites, then we can apply that criteria to it. Is that fair? Because we're not going to resolve it here right now.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to see Willard Springs, I think, is a viable option for the county to consider.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let us put it on the list as one of the sites within our matrix. Okay. I have a couple questions that popped up here from various folks from the community. One of them is, and maybe Jeff, you could address it. Have you explored installing signs that would alert travelers that there were slow moving vehicles ahead?
Yeah, so that would require ADOT's permission. To put any signs on the highway right away would be a process we'd have to work with ADOT. Carl could probably speak to that a little bit more, but I know with Fort Tuthill and events, we tried to get some signage on 17, and it was an ADOT process, and so they would need to be in the ADOT right away. Presumably, they would be electric signs. So it's an option, but that would really be upon ADOT's approval to have any signage on 17 to alert travelers.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, we put signs up for elk, which are far more dangerous than snowplows.
Yeah, the only thing you have to consider, it is an ADOT thing, and whether they be permanent signs or just seasonal signs, you'd have to work all that stuff out. But signage is not very good in snowstorms. Visibility isn't the best, so they may have to be lighted signs. There's a lot to work out. Nothing's impossible for sure.
Okay. Had another question here. Are the drivers, do they currently live in Munds Park or Flagstaff?
They come from all over. The majority of the time they do come from Flagstaff, but we have had people out of Munds Park before. The odds of getting somebody aren't very high. We've even had people, though, actually come clear up to work from the Verde Valley. So it's, people have their own choice where they live, as they have an hour response is all time we allow.
Yeah, I believe that was asked on one of our other meetings too. And I think what the answer then was, currently there's no one in Munds that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, let me go ahead and move this along. I'm going to address regarding location G, and that's the Forest Service partial on 240. Now, regarding that, we had many residents submit their requests that the 240 location be considered. Now, we've tried to be open to all residents and taking in all the requests. That's why it appeared on our list. Given that Matt McGrath, that's the from the Forest Service, he emailed last night that the Forest Service is highly unlikely that they would approve a site off 240. So basis that, we will go ahead and remove that site today from consideration. Matt did say that other locations on the forest, that it's their preference that the locations not be located on the forest. However, but if it is shown that it's impractical to not have one there, then they would pursue on forest locations with us. And they're committed to working both with the county as well as with the committee should another proposed site on the forest be recommended. So like I say, that's why we've elected, or why we put it on there as a site location for all the residents requesting, and then why we're taking it off based on Matt McGrath's email. Any comment?
I would second taking that off too. I don't think that's in consideration anymore.
Yes, and that's why, as a committee here, we're making that official. So appreciate that support. Okay, we'll move on then with what we want to focus on next is developing the evaluation matrix for the sites. And this matrix is an attempt to measure, quantify these various elements on the matrix. So what I'd like us to do is to go ahead, and by the way, these elements have come about during our various discussions at our committee meetings. So we've made these headings here, but what we'd like to do now is to further define each category and make sure, as we define that, how we're going to measure it. Okay? With the idea being is that we'll eventually be able to apply all that criteria to the various sites to help us prioritize and hopefully select the most optimum solution. Okay, so the definition is seeing there. What we'll try doing is we're having these discussions. We'll try to capture our thoughts along with it in comments. And I might add there, Everett, when you sent an email out wanting to know some additional items to be considered, basically I looked at including that into the different
Yeah, but I appreciate that, Tom, but right now, with the elimination of 240, that, and dealing with commercial sites and sites on the west side of I-70, some of my comments, would not mean anything anymore, I believe. So
let's go through them and try them there, Everett.
Okay, sure, thanks.
Starting out with the access. And I'll start out because I wrote some comments down, and I'm sure everyone else has some comments as well. When we say access to a site, I think it's going to, what was discussed earlier with Jeff is that, is it private or public easement to that site? I think that'll be one of the components we'll have to determine. And then the second item I had is what you were saying, Everett, is that the road conditions for the equipment operators to access them during inclement weather. And you heard about the one site there on the west side where, and even, well, all of them on the west side are basically non-improved roads. And can that be an issue? Can that be a concern in being able to even access them during the inclement weathers, whether it be flooding or snowstorm?
Well, if staying off of I-17, if we're going to make that a consideration, which it is, the 3 sites by the rest area need access to the Forest Service Road, I don't know, 68695 or something. Yet that Forest Service Road now is blocked, okay? The private owner has closed that road down. Whether they can or not has to be asked. However, even if access was there, that's an extreme, I've driven that road, that's an extremely rough road. So there would have to be improvements to that road to stay them off of I-17.
Yeah,
But-
and I think we're saying the same thing, is that
Yeah.
accessibility needs to be one of the criterias that we look at in each location.
I have driven that road just within the last couple months, and it is a very smooth road that is maintained very well.
What road are you talking about? West Woodruff?
Forest Service Road 9469S, which goes from the RV park up to the rest stop. It's a very smooth road.
Have you driven it through the RV park?
Yes, I have.
Over that bridge? You think that bridge is a good bridge?
Like I in the email I put out before that had the pros and cons of those locations, the bridge would be fine, but you would have to probably do some maintenance through the flood channel to keep the trees and the debris from blocking the bridge and the waterway. So there's county maintenance that would have to be done on that flood channel.
Wes, it's not a good road. It needs work.
It's a very good road, very smooth road. I've driven it many times.
Okay, gentlemen, look, all I'm trying to do right now is to reach some sort of agreement that access is something that should be considered as we look at these. I'm not wanting to dive into the details of it right now because or we'll never get through this. So just some sort of agreement that access, and I think you're both agreeing, is that it needs to be considered. Now, what's the condition and so forth on it at the current time? I don't know, and I don't think any of us, not all of us, could comment on it, but just looking at access being a criteria.
Absolutely.
You agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, move to the next one, utilities. I think we heard earlier from Jeff that, some locations are better suited because of utilities such as water, electric, and even sewer. Any other thoughts or comments regarding the utilities? I think it's
water and electric are generally close to that area because there has been existing facilities that are there. There's a lift station, there's a transformer, so there is power and water. When it comes to the sewer, you could always use a holding tank that would be pumped occasionally.
okay.
We're talking about the south, the two parcels south of AG's, because there's no utilities. I think it was already stated. When you look at the rest area, there's an issue with utilities at the rest area, is there not?
Well, again, gentlemen, if I can say, if these need to be evaluated and determined
Absolutely.
what are the issues with it for each location. So I don't want to dive into these
Correct.
right now if we can. Just
Agree.
trying to keep focused on what's the criteria that we're going to be measuring all the locations, okay?
And you can set, if you want to set utilities, electricity is the only deal breaker. We have to have electricity.
Okay.
Water is a bonus, and of course sewer is too. Would probably be on propane. So those are the utilities. But water and sewer, we do have locations that do not have water and sewer.
Okay. Okay, appreciate that, Carl.
Does Schnebly Hill have all three of those right now?
For us, all we're using is electricity. We're not using any of their water. We're actually only plugged into an outer area of their facility where we can at least plug in the graders to keep them warm. But we do not use any of their other facilities.
Okay, but they're on site there.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is safety. The only item I was thinking there, with the primary one, is I-17 travel. I don't know if there's other items we should be considering as well. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think we need to consider driver safety getting to the facility before it's been plowed.
Okay.
I mean, if we're talking a location that they have to use a Forest Service road to get to, I don't know how comfortable I am sending them up a road that may have, you know, a foot or two or snow through it and possible, you know, water issues.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, to the no other comments there. The next one we had was community view of sheds. And that really came from the concern of the community of having a shed, particularly next to your home, and being able to see it, or even seeing it from the view of the road. If any thoughts there? If we're going to measure this, one item that I guess I would look at is it yes or no from Munds Park homes and roadways? Do you have a view of the sheds? At least we can measure. That's a measurable.
Would that also include things like real estate valuation decline or anything that as a result of having a facility next to their house or within view?
Yeah, the SPDS disclosures for homeowners, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, anything that would devalue a person's home.
Oh, well, let's look at both sides of it, either a positive or a negative factor to the home seller. Is that fair?
Yep, I think so, depending on how you look at it. Just for my own interest, I followed up with a couple brokers and trying to understand that more of that disclosure form. And it's basically if it has been defined that a property, that a equipment barn is going to be close proximity to a property, then the homeowner at the time of sale would need to disclose it. So in other words, not anywhere in Munds Park, it'd have to be close to that individual property.
Well, I would even say, I mean, I know we're talking about just the view of it, because I mean, nobody wants to see it in their backyard, obviously, or their side yard or whatever. But also the noise. So, I mean, so you may not be exactly where you can see it, but if it's really loud at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, that's a problem as well.
Okay.
I had added that to it, Tom. I had noise, smell, and visibility.
Okay.
Because the diesel trucks starting up in the morning obviously are going to emit fumes, and depending on which way the wind is blowing, can be a problem.
Okay. Now I had a comment come in, the devaluation of property or commercial property should be considered. I'm not sure we know how to do that. We can put it down there as an item to consider, but I don't know how we measure that. Okay, the next item we had on there was cost. Yes.
What I would say, Tom, is I think you start out with the primary cost of the shed. In other words, the county would know X number of dollars to build a shed. Then not beating a dead horse, but if you were putting that shed at Schnebly Hill or Willett Springs, it would have minimal additional cost. However, if you had to improve roads, add utilities, such like that, then the cost would go up. So what I'm trying to say is start out with a base plus.
Okay, let me suggest this then. Since the original budget was approximately 500,000, then so that we can quantify this, let me suggest that we say a base budget approximately 500,000. If the costs are over 500,000, well, pick 750,000 in that range, then that would be another level of cost. And then if it's over that 750,000, then it's even a greater cost with it. So at least we can measure it in some fashion of, okay, we're within budget, we're going to exceed budget, or we're going to extremely exceed budget. Having some metrics like that to help us in determining which is the best location.
Tom, do you know if we're going
Tom,
to get
why don't we-
access to the budget numbers for the two private locations as far as what the proposals have been?
I'm sorry, say again?
I'm sorry, Walt, didn't mean to cut you off. Is there a way to find out the actual budget proposals for the private facilities so we know what the numbers would be?
Let me.
So I can answer.
Essler, if, I think we need to let the county determine that, since they're in the negotiation. They would be in the negotiations armchair of this. But Essler, if you want to comment.
Yeah, no, I can answer so we've gotten a kind of high level proposal from one of the property owners, the private owners, for a 10-year lease that was twice the budgeted amount that we had if we were to build a facility that the county would own it on forest land in perpetuity. So that's the delta and the difference. The one thing that the private property owner has asked is share those exact numbers, given that they expect other competition and a potential other, to disclose those numbers fully. But I can share that it was a 10-year lease that was twice the budgeted amount. So it's pretty clear kind of what that break point is in terms of where it falls.
Is that the one that Lucinda used the term non-starter when she was discussing it?
Yeah, I mean, again, that is extreme. Again, we're trying to address a long-term need, and what we have at the table from right now in terms of a proposal is a short-term solution that is twice as much as what that long-term need and cost would be if the county was to solve it. And that's the dynamic that we're in, and that's part of the conversations that we've had all along is how do we meet those and not break the bank and not create deficiencies and challenges with the budget the way revenues are coming in, especially in this climate.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help with the answering?
Yes.
Okay, the next one we have then was the floodplain designation. And for that, because there was some concern there with the accessibility, particularly on the west side, in talking over the county, apparently that's fairly easy for us to rate each site based on based on the floodplain ratings that are being used today.
Two things there, Tom. I think you have sites that are on the floodplain, but you also have sites that you need to go through the floodplain. In particular, the forest site south of Agee's is not in the floodplain, but in order to access it, you go through the floodplain. So I don't know if you want to differentiate between in the floodplain or through the floodplain to get to it.
Yeah, a good one, Everett. I think we should, a personal perspective. Like I said, we can identify within each location what the floodplain designation is for that property, but then, yeah, the accessibility to those, what are the risks relative to flooding?
Tom,
Well, you
I would,
wouldn't,
and to answer Everett's question, I think, I mean, that would be covered under the access criteria if it was a floodplain access. So it's a good point, but I think in terms of the matrix, that would be into the access evaluation.
Okay, so at least we'll capture it there in the suggestion. Let's move it under access versus the floodplain designation of the specific property. Okay. Any other comments?
let me ask on that, is being in a floodplain for the county a non-starter?
Well, I think being on the floodplain, well, all that means in a lot of ways is a lot of engineering and work around. We wouldn't put a facility that is critical for critical operations in the floodplain and at risk. So, I mean, yes, like I think it would require, like if the parcel was in a floodplain, like it would require additional engineering work, which is an additional cost in order to remove and mitigate those floodplain or flood issues. And ideally, we would want to like have a facility that can withstand, that can be a viable option to respond at the time where the community needs it the most to be operational. And those are usually like, you know, like in like post-fire or flood events are like the major. And so we would want to like be able to respond. So
Yeah, but we shouldn't, in other words, my question is, if there's other options and a floodplain site is an option, and that's really a non-starter to the county, then maybe that should be set up front so we don't waste any time on it.
yeah, I mean, again, I think that's what this like matrix ultimately will like give the community or the committee an opportunity to evaluate and recommend like the sites that are more viable than others.
Okay, yes, Kat, I got your note there. Time check here. Let's see if we're getting, we can get through this piece of it. On the forest, and you know, I think that's fairly straightforward in the sense that yes or no, you know, should be part of our decision process. Now, Everett, what your comments there in the one note was, it should require a special use permit.
Yeah, the point I was making was, and not beating a dead horse, but if you look at Willard Springs, I don't think you would need a special use permit, even though it is on the forest. If you look at the site, the Forest Service site south of Agee's, you in fact would need a special use permit. So I was just stating that on forest, SUP required or not required, just to help with the decision.
Okay, and what Essler's putting down there now is the NPA environmental study is required if on the forest. I mean, that's the governmental regulation. So something to be considered as well.
Would that be true if we were, if you, in other words, well, you're going to stay if Schnebly Hill, you wouldn't have to do anything, and Schnebly and Willard Springs, you wouldn't have to do anything. Is that correct?
Everett, I don't believe that that's the case. I think if we would be putting like anything on the Forest Service, then we'll have to look at that in more detail. We would be required to like meet those. I mean, there's like, it's an amendment of like the existing use and the terms and conditions of current use. Like it's a green waste site, a transfer station at Willard Spring.
You just can't go and add stuff to it. Okay.
Like the Forest Service would require like some sort of NEPA study and surveying as the first step before considering any application.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments relative to the on the forest or to any of the other criteria items in the matrix?
I don't have, I mean, I think what you have is fine. I just want to, say that as far as on the forest, I mean, I think the answer, I mean, and I guess this is my opinion because I don't know how everyone else feels, but, the answer would be no. And, unless there's already something that is, that is existing that we can, we could share. But to bring up something new in a different place in the forest, I mean, I think that should be something, if we're saying we don't want that, we should make sure that that's part of the criteria.
Agreed. Allison also brought up a point in her message there as well. We're talking about potential safety issues on I-17. Well, there's also potential fire issues with having a facility like this, on forest property as well. So that should probably be a consideration.
Okay. Okay. Kat, we're going to get to this meeting our time stop here. Okay, so what we've done here today is we've narrowed down the various sites that we should be looking at, and then the various components that we'll be measuring each of these sites against. What I would like to ask all the committee members is that between now and our next meeting on Wednesday, December 9th, suggest each committee member review the site selection matrix and measurable criteria that we discussed today, or what we need to include within those metrics, and if be kind enough to share them with me so that I can work with Essler in prior to the meeting of having all those better defined, and so that we can go through the next meeting in by the way, getting those further defined, getting them out to you, and then putting together your own assessment with that using the metrics, so that at our next meeting, hopefully we can go through those, we can prioritize the different sites, and hopefully make a recommendation on a potential site as we go forward. Does that sound fair?
Is it possible, Tom, from Esther to get an updated matrix with a little more of the detail we talked about today to make our feedback to you better?
Yes, we'll do. You saw Essler taking notes here as we're going along, trying to capture the thoughts regarding each of the criteria items. And we'll put I'll work with them in putting it together to get it out to everyone. So we're kind of working from the same document. Fair? Is that
Thank you.
addressing what you're wanting?
Yeah, that's good. You know, something that where we are not all going off 13 different ways. We're kind of using the basis that you and Esther are giving us direction, and then we can update it.
Okay.
More consistent.
Okey doke. If no other comments, and by the way, we did receive quite a few questions and comments or chats. We tried to address some of those from the residents that are on here with us. But when we summarize our meeting notes, we'll see if we can address any questions that were not addressed in the meeting today as we put out those notes. Okay. In the meantime, everyone, please be safe and have a happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
Thanks for all your work, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good job, Mark.
Well, thanks, Esler. I hope it all worked, and I'm going to end things out and
Okay.
get up.
Will you get like a copy of those comments that or questions that came in too?
Yeah, I'm
Trying to look at them. I'm trying to look at them now.
yeah, I will go ahead and do that, see what we can do, and yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Well, thanks.
All right, thank you. All right. See ya.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Tom.